I'm the House co-chair. With me is my Senate co-chair, Senator Brendan Creighton. In attendance at the hearing, we have the Senate Vice Chair, I see, Senator Keenan, and the House Vice Chair, Representative Murray. Joining us remotely and as additional members of the committee sign in, I'll try and note we have Representative Blais, Representative Cairns, Representative Oral, Representative Fluker Oakley, Representative Sabadosa, Representative Capano, and Representative DeCoste. And as I say, other members may join us. This is a hearing that was noticed previously. It is as is our practice, it is a hybrid hearing, thus permitting the public to both view the hearing remotely and to participate. There was a link published for those either to watch or to let us know, that they wish to testify on the various bills in the categories that we have before us today. And we do have some people who have signed up remotely. We also have some individuals who are in attendance who've indicated that they wish to testify. One thing for those not familiar with the typical practice of this committee is that for members of the legislature who intend to testify, we do, in recognition of their schedules, take them out of order. I don't think that's a big issue today. Right now, I'm looking at 5 people in total who've expressed an interest in testifying. However, we do at the end, if there are people in attendance who did not sign in, ask if they do wish to testify. That's kind of the housekeeping part of this. I welcome everyone's attendance today in the hearing that we have, and I'd briefly turn it over to Senator Creighton if you had any remarks or introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate. I think you covered it all, and I did just want to acknowledge the Senate Vice Chair Paul Marks, who joined by phone as well. And we appreciate everyone taking the time to come today to testify in person or remotely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I should indicate we do also accept written testimony on this. We've typically allowed the record, so to speak, for the hearing to remain open for a week after the conclusion of the public hearing, so that if there are people either in attendance or watching remotely who realize that either supplementing their testimony or just providing something in a written format could be helpful to the committee's deliberations, that's also acceptable. And so I would think we'll continue that practice so that people can weigh in after today if they want to submit written. And by written, we mean either the old-fashioned, truly written on a piece of paper, or electronically by email or some other electronic communication. That said, I do want to indicate we do have some written testimony that has come in already, and that would be we have heard on and this is just in the order as I open this testimony in a written form from Representative Natalie Higgins in support of House 3334, an act to designate a certain bridge in Leominster as the Captain Ross Reynolds Memorial Bridge. That would be part of the committee's record. We also have testimony from a Dr. RM, and I always apologize on these, Latanison, an emeritus professor at MIT, in favor of Senate Bill 2259, recognizing the former Governor John Volpe for a facility in Winchester. We have testimony also in favor of that bill that was electronically submitted from a resident of Winchester, John Subier. And we have written testimony to the committee on Senate Bill 2367 and House Bill 3372 relative to third-party delivery reporting, submitted by an organization called TechNet. And from Representative Paul McMurtry, we have a written statement in favor of House 3381, dealing with access to driving records. And also Representative McMurtry has indicated support for House 3382, designated a bridge in the town of Dedham as the Deborah Cochran Memorial Bridge, and also a separate bridge in Dedham, House 3383, in recognition of the Honorable Kelly Timilty. And finally, we have written provided by the ranking minority member of the committee, Representative Howard, in support of House 3337, dealing with historic routes, ROUTES. And as I say, the committee will accept written or electronic messages in support or opposition to bills today. With that, I'll open up the public hearing testimony part of this. First to sign in to testify is Travis Pollock from MAPC. Mr. Pollock. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Crichton, Chair Strauss, and members of the community. My name is Travis Pollock. I'm a senior transportation planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of Senate Bill 2367, filed by Senator Crichton, and House Bill 3372, filed by Representative Livingstone. MAPC is the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, serving the people who live and work in the 101 cities and towns of the region. MAPC works to build a more equitable region by promoting smart growth and regional collaboration. MAPC has been working with our cities and towns to understand and plan for the implications of transportation network companies, or TNCs, like Uber and Lyft. Our agency has been studying the impact of TNCs on our transportation and land use patterns since 2017, just after TNCs came on the scene. During the pandemic, we noted an increase of rapid deliveries by third-party delivery companies, including Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub, among others. We first became aware of this when reviewing Securities and Exchange Commission report data from Uber, which showed that revenue from food deliveries in 2020 was greater than that from ride-hailing. This information suggested that the scale of impacts of these rapid food deliveries may be comparable to TNCs. These bills would require data reporting for these rapid deliveries, very similar to the current reporting requirements for TNC rides. Understanding this data will support transportation planning and curb management, help us to understand the impacts on emissions and congestion, and provide an opportunity to understand how this new technology has impacted the economy. In December 2022, we released a report from App to Table, Rapid Food Deliveries in Massachusetts. That was the culmination of research to understand the transportation, land use, and economic effects of rapid food deliveries. There were no studies or reports that definitively identify the number of app-based deliveries in the US or Massachusetts, but we used SEC filings and market data, and we estimate that third-party rapid food deliveries in 2021 likely exceeded the number of ride-hailing trips from TNCs. We further found that the number of rapid food deliveries in Massachusetts has likely more than doubled in the last 3 years, from approximately 40 million in 2019 to between 80 and 105 million food deliveries in 2021. And data show this service is popular, A 2021 national survey found that 42% of adults order food via apps at least once a month, and 6.5% order deliveries from food apps every day. Third-party delivery businesses such as DoorDash and Uber Eats have seen continued growth in 2022 and 2023. Online order and delivery platforms are shifting the way many restaurants, convenience stores, and grocery stores market their products and services to grow their businesses. This growing demand for rapid food deliveries creates a new dynamic for municipalities managing parking and street curbs, as well as zoning for downtowns, neighborhoods, and village centers and main streets. Like TNCs, third-party delivery apps have large impacts on street congestion, idling, and associated impacts at the curb, and greater competition for parking, resulting in unsafe and illegal practices such as double parking in bus, bike, and travel lanes. A London-based study found that third-party delivery drivers spend an average of 10 minutes occupying the curb or parking area for picking up food at a restaurant, whereas data from similar studies show that an average TNC rider pickup is only 1 to 5 minutes. When not delivering, many food delivery drivers spend time waiting for their next assignment, time known as deadheading, that leads to increased congestion and emissions. Most rapid food deliveries are within 1 to 5 miles, suggesting that more environmentally sustainable delivery methods such as e-bikes or electric mopeds might be feasible. Third-party delivery apps are likely here to stay and have already impacted both our transportation system and our economy. To find ways to reduce congestions and emissions, we first need to access to the data for a full picture of the impacts of third-party delivery apps, and ask you to favorably report Senate Bill 2367 filed by Senator Crichton and House Bill 3372. Thank you for this opportunity to share this information. MAPC will be submitting written testimony with additional information and details, and we will share our full report with the committee. I am happy to answer any questions you have today.
Thank you, Mr. Pollack, and thanks to the participation of the organization, MAPC itself. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, and we look forward to receiving the information you referred to. Thanks again. Next to have signed up, John Buchanan from the Mass Association of Auto Clubs. Thought I saw you. There you are.
Thank you, Chairman Strauss. Chairman Crichton. These two bills, House Bill 3337 and Senate Bill 2232, are both associated with the same efforts to have U.S. Routes 1, 6, and 20 designated in the state of Massachusetts as historic routes, which allows the organizations which have been promoting use of these highways as tourist destinations for the automotive hobby groups. I represent the Massachusetts Association of Auto Clubs, which are 300 auto clubs here in the state of Massachusetts. Part of the bucket list items for any of the collector car owners is to travel some of these historic roads, 66 being perhaps the most famous and well-known. Route 6 has less numbers, but has more attractions and is longer. We have two of the longest transcontinental highways, which are pretty much intact in US Routes 6 and 20. 20 begins in Boston, ends 2,369 miles later on the Pacific coast in Newport, Oregon. Route 6 begins in Provincetown and ended in Long Beach, California, was truncated in 1954 to 3,227 miles. And, excuse me, Route 1 is 2,369. Route 20 is 3,365. I've driven them all. And in the process of driving, I do run into road-torians, as they're called, traversing either east or west or north and south. And the purpose of designating the highways is to allow the organizations that support the programs for the cities and towns along the routes that were replaced when the larger interstate system came in the 1950s, is to promote tourism and to promote small business in these communities by placing signs which are not funded by the states, but by local organizations and chambers of commerce. The benefit Massachusetts has within its borders, which is a small state compared to the 14, 16 states that these routes traverse, is that we have perhaps more tourist attractions within the state than the entire route of Route 66 or the Lincoln Highway, Route 20. And we attempted to do this passage back 2017. It did pass the House, did not make it through the Senate. And we're trying to get it through again. And I think what is very beneficial for those that travel is to enjoy the scenery, enjoy the journey, and that's what it's all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. And as you note, but the history is this idea has always received a sympathetic ear in this committee. So we'll see what happens going forward. I don't have any questions. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none and seeing none from those remotely. Thank you again. Nice to see you again. And I will now go to those, but I'll come back to those in attendance, but I'll now go to those who've signed up remotely. I did neglect, and before I do that, we also did receive written support for testimony jointly from Senator Lovely and Rep. Paracella in support of Senate 2263 and House 3400. And we also received written testimony in partial opposition to House 3404 and House 3431 from the National Insurance Crime Bureau, an organization in Des Plaines, Illinois. Now remotely, and I see he's been here patiently, and we welcome him, Representative David Linsky from Natick. I believe the microphone should be on. Representative Linsky, thank you, welcome, and what have you got for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Senate Chairman and members of the committee, my friends on the committee. I am here to testify in favor of the bill that I filed, House Bill 3367. And this would be an act to name the portion of the Massachusetts Turnpike between Boston and Worcester after both Bob Cousy and Bill Russell. And I'm proud to say that a portion of that route goes through my district, of course, in Natick, pretty much right in the middle. We're all very familiar, I am sure, with the superb, unbelievable basketball careers of both of these men. Part of 18 world championships for the Boston Celtics. But that's not the only reason to name this portion of the highway. This highway connects the two largest cities in New England, Worcester and Boston. But it is also a symbol of connecting the races, quite frankly. You had the civil rights leader, first black coach in the NBA, Bill Russell, and then you have obviously a Caucasian player, Bob Cousy, son of Worcester, who really brought this state and this community together. And it would be a symbol, quite frankly, of racial harmony. To honor both of these men. We've lost Bill Russell in the past year. He was a noted, in addition to being, the superb basketball player and coach, but he was known as a thoughtful civil rights leader. And that the way in which these two people work together is a symbol of racial harmony, quite frankly. And it's something that all of us can use and aspire to in these difficult times. So I think that this would be a fitting way to honor both of these men by naming the connection between Boston, where they played, and Worcester, where Bob Cousy is from and still lives. And I would ask this committee to report this bill out favorably, and let's do something good, quite frankly. So that's House Bill 3367.
Thank you very much, Representative, and for the context that you provided in support of the bill. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none and none remotely. Thank you, Representative. Nice to see you. I see Representative Whips has joined us, a member of the committee. Thank you. Well, I always want to point out to people, in time and distance are different ideas in with regard to commuting. I got in at 2 hours and 20 minutes today, but I don't know. Yours might have been about the same. Okay. Welcome. Next to have signed up remotely, I think I see him here, is Gavi Wolf from Massachusetts ACLU. Mr. Wolf, the floor is yours if your microphone is on. Okay.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Welcome.
Hi. Good morning. My name is Gavi Wolf, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the ACLU of Massachusetts in support of legislation that would protect drivers from misuse of electronically collected data showing where they go and when. This includes two bills filed by Chair Strauss, House 3431 and 3434, which deal with license plate readers and electronic tolling respectively, and House 3404 filed by House Leader Sarah Peak, which addresses both kinds of data. And for simplicity's sake, I'm going to focus on 3404, but I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to say upfront, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your longstanding interest and leadership on these issues. Anyone with an easy pass is familiar with electronic tolling, which uses license plate reader technology to identify cars as they pass various highway checkpoints and enable the DOT to send drivers bills for any unpaid tolls. Automatic license plate readers can also be deployed for law enforcement purposes. They can be deployed for law enforcement purposes to identify vehicles that appear on hot lists and are of interest for one reason or another, whether they're not properly registered, or they were reported stolen, or they were associated with the commission of a crime. And these are useful tools with legitimate transportation and law enforcement purposes. However, these tools track where every driver goes on and off, where every driver gets on and off the Mass Pike and other toll roads. And they can be put up by police in fixed locations or mounted on police cruisers that capture information about every single car on the road. They're capable of creating thousands of records per minute. McDonald's used to advertise billions and billions served, and the same slogan could be used to describe license plate readers, billions and billions scanned. As a result, without any legal guardrails, this technology can easily amount to dragnet surveillance of the general population. The legislation before this committee simply seeks to ensure that, one, data captured by license plate readers and electronic tolling systems is used only for their primary transportation and law enforcement purposes. Two, the data is deleted within a limited time, unless it's reasonably suspected of being connected to criminal activity. Three, the data is never sold and is not shared with or accessed by another governmental entity without a warrant. And four, that license plate readers are not used for the pernicious purpose of monitoring First Amendment activity, such as who attends a political convention or an event. So with that, I urge the committee to advance this legislation with a favorable report and to put in place these basic safeguards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf, and thank you for your testimony and the participation on this issue by the ACLU of Massachusetts. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none here or remotely, thank you again, and appreciate the testimony. That covers those who've signed up in advance to testify remotely and those who are in attendance. But just in case, is there anyone in attendance who may not have signed up who wishes to testify on matters before the committee today? Now would be the chance. Okay, while you discuss it, I see someone in the back. Why don't you come forward?
Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just identify yourself, and the floor is yours.
My name is Vincent Lawrence Dixon, 60 Lake Street, Winchester, Mass. SS 2259 is the bill I'm testifying on. I had signed up out back there online.
Oh, okay.
Additional contact information is available. Among the most significant political and government leaders of our Commonwealth has been the late Governor John Anthony Volpe. And I appear before you to advocate a simple and direct living memorial to him, renaming the Winchester Center commuter rail station to the John A. Volpe Winchester Center Station. The station itself is elevated because of a decision that he made at an earlier point in his career of public service to raise the rail line above street level, where vehicles were being caught, hit, and much in the way of tragic events happening. This was when he was Mass Department of Public Works Commissioner. So the station itself, which is being rebuilt and in coming months will be reopened, reflects a significant gesture that has improved our town. I have provided in this proposed legislation an ad hoc mechanism that can fashion public input and official actions into the proper form. During the earlier phases of design and since, I've advocated for the idea and largely found supporting sympathy for this gesture of respect and inspiration. I believe you also received some additional material. There's also a petition with about a dozen signatures, and I certainly can collect a lot more who wish to support the adoption. We share a sense that this significant member of our community for much of his life deserves public recognition, especially since his decision to elevate the station has saved uncounted lives and prevented countless injuries over decades. In addition, his commitment to transportation and honest administration throughout his public career deserve respect and celebration, hoping to educate all people in coming years. Please seriously consider our sincerest support for this significant naming idea. There's some other points here and a wonderful picture of him early in his career and with President Eisenhower, because he was one of the key officials in designing and implementing the interstate highway system, which Eisenhower was very strong on because he had discovered the German Autobahn system, which had risked the Battle of the Bulge that we actually won. He was a remarkable and important individual in our history and nationally. Several Winchester residents share an interest in supporting the individuals. I know that Charlie Baker's father and his father actually knew each other over the years, and there's many other people as well. He was governor of Massachusetts for 3 terms, the last 2-year term governor, the first 4-year term governor, went on to be Secretary of Transportation nationally. He was chair of the National Governors Association, U.S. ambassador to Italy. A side story is he perhaps prevented a military coup in Italy because somebody checked with him and he said he didn't think we would like that. He was a construction contractor in the U.S. Navy. He was in the Civil Engineering Corps, called a Navy Seabee, during World War II. Before he went in the service, he was an elected Winchester town meeting member, topped his ward with 400 votes when people were getting 320. Is a graduate of Wentworth Institute. He was also, late in his career, the first National Commission chair on drunk driving and driving safety. Would you believe that that hadn't happened yet until the 1970s and 1980s? Strong local charity interests. And there is, of course, the John Volpe Transportation Center that is being reimagined and redeveloped over in Kendall Square. He was a considerate person of distinction and charm, many qualities. Was one that sometimes is a bit fragile these days, that he was bipartisan or even nonpartisan. Thoughtful in his campaigns, public decision-making roles, and had a wide level of respect across a wide range. So I strongly urge your support for S2259. I'll hand these in to you and look forward to, if there's a need, to answer other questions and help in various ways. It's something that would be wonderful in our town to have a recognition of that. In many ways, actually, a throwback, not unlike Governor McCall, who was the one who changed the governor from 1 year to 2 year in reform government. Volpe was also part of reforming and creating, actually, the cabinet system that we did not have. Imagine 300 state agencies and departments reporting to the governor without a cabinet. You think you have problems now. But he was very important in that as well. And I hope this is on attentive ears, and I may have your support with other people as well.
Thank you so much for putting that together. And as I noted, we did get some other comments. The papers that you have to submit, we have a staff member to your left, and he'll be happy to take those for the
Thank you.
committee's use. Any questions from members of the committee? I see none and none remotely. Thank you for taking the time to honor this great Massachusetts
The
leader.
transportation in.
I get it. Anyone else? Yes, please come forward.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Martin Kraft. I'm the Vice President of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts, and this is for Bill Senate 2250, and the second one is
Take your time.
3289. The private investigation industry is a $7 billion business in 2021 by reference of the IBIS World Research Foundation. Several members of the Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts and licensed private investigators conduct business throughout Massachusetts in the judicial system, court system. As you know, Committee for Public Counsel Service is a state organization that assists indigent persons receiving legal representation by attorneys appointed representing them by CPCS. It should be noted the Massachusetts State Police license private investigators. The Massachusetts State Police conducts extensive backgrounds on each private investigator. The investigators are vetted each year by the state certification unit. We are requesting a streamlined approach to what we already have access to by law. We would appreciate being approved so the investigator can access registry of motor vehicle information in an online link. Like several other non-law enforcement agencies, to include insurance companies, constables, and tow truck companies. It is a benefit to the Commonwealth and to the taxpayer that this Bill Senate 2250 and House 3289 amendments be implemented. As an investigator must go in person to go to the registry to obtain any license or motor vehicle data needed to locate witnesses, confirming license information on motor vehicles involved in accidents and victims of crime. Private investigators work diligently with defense attorneys to obtain the same information the district attorney has already been able to get without having to go to the registry of motor vehicles. Investigators spend hours in line at the registry locations. This costing man hours of the personnel at the registry and the Commonwealth. Investigators' time is paid for by the state of Massachusetts taxpayers. All the time being billed for physically standing in line at the registry motor vehicles counter would be eliminated. With this amendment passed, man hours be discontinued at the registry, a system presently overburdened with the heavy workload due to the current laws for several 100,000 people obtaining driver's licenses. This is not a new bill. This is only an amendment to the present statute, adding licensed private investigators to the list to obtain the link to streamline our efforts to obtaining information used in the defense of indigent defendants, and witnesses must adequately be equal so they may receive and be represented for a fair trial. Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for taking the time to listen to my testimony, and I respectfully ask that you report this bill out of committee favorably.
Thank you, Mr. Kraft, and for taking the time to help the committee work through with this legislation. Are there any questions from members of the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Representative. Oh, well, yes, Representative Cairns, and then I'll come over to our colleague. Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't have the benefit of seeing everyone. I thank my colleague for yielding. Question for the witness. Very interesting testimony. Do you need an appointment as a private investigator if you need to go to the registry? Are you required to have an appointment the same way anybody else would have to unless they're doing a renewal? I think that's the one task for which you don't need an appointment. What about for you folks?
Ma'am,
Can you walk in?
during the pandemic, there was an appointment schedule that was set in place, but the protocol is in disarray. No one knows, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing in order to get the information to us. So we could go stand in line for 2 hours and 3 hours, all of a sudden get to the counter and they'll say, oh, that person that supposedly gets you that information is not working today. You're going to have to come back. So all that money that we have to, the Commonwealth has to pay out for that. We're just looking to streamline something that's already in our favor for the law, but it's just stopping from going there, keeping us from going there and costing money to get the information. The appointment schedule doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It's, they just push us back in line.
You mean you make an appointment and then you get there and they say you have to
They're not even taking appointments for us. They can tell you, come in on Wednesday at 2:00, or they're not taking scheduled appointments. Like during the pandemic, it was like, go to the registry at 10:00 in the morning. And it's still like so discombobulated that it was like not worth the time to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Whips, we have a question, sir.
Are there, with regards to the information you're looking for, you said insurance companies have access and can remotely access the RMV database. Is there more you're looking for access to, or is it basically the same? If you have access, you have access.
Just to say, the access it gives us, for the defense attorneys. So the defense attorneys have to subpoena the records, so driving history, access, locate witnesses, murder cases, all the important things that we do for the defense attorneys. And it's the same information that the district attorney is getting. And it's all under the law. We're required to get that for their court cases.
And the hourly rate that you charge, you actually bill the Commonwealth for?
The Commonwealth gets billed for everything that we do. We have
For standing in line for
I'm
hours?
sorry.
For if you're standing in line, that's billable hours
That's
to
correct.
the Commonwealth?
Yes.
All right, I appreciate it. I think that definitely should be streamlined a bit for you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have two other gentlemen who would like to testify.
Sure, of course. Who's next? Yep. Okay.
Chairman Strauss, Chairman Crichton, thanks for hearing me today. My name's Stan Vogt. I'm president of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts. And I too am here testing on House 3289, Senate 2250. To kind of further some of those questions, because some of my information is duplicative, there is no cutout in the Registry of Motor Vehicles website to be able to make an appointment for private investigators. So that in lies some of the problem. What you end up having to do is say, I want to register a vehicle, or I need a driver's license today, which obviously isn't appropriate. And the only way when you get in there, a run-of-the-mill Registry of Motor Vehicles employee cannot process your records. It has to be a supervisor. To your question regarding what types of records, these are really all records. If you think about a criminal case, if there's one record, a CPCS case or any other criminal case, there's one record that exists in the Registry of Motor Vehicles that could help free somebody who's wrongly accused. Those are the records that we need access to. With regard to the access that those other unlicensed, shouldn't say unlicensed, but those other professionals that utilize this information, such as insurance adjusters, tow truck drivers, they have more of a limited access. And although that access is helpful in a lot of instances, it is not thorough enough for us to do our due diligence as criminal investigators in that process. But we also work very, very many other types of cases, which this impacts also. Take insurance, for example. If you think about how expensive insurance is, and we're trying to prevent insurance fraud, and we're conducting surveillance on anti-fraud activities, the same thing applies. You still need to access these records to be able to properly do your job, and to be thorough in what you're doing, and to be able to provide accurate information to the clients that are hiring you, insurance companies who have access to the information. So this is simply a delivery method. We have access to this information under the Driver Privacy Protection Act. We are thoroughly vetted, more vetted than most professionals, and we are separate from the large structure of the Division of Professional Licensure, to where we are licensed by the Massachusetts State Police, undergoing an annual background check, the same as the troopers do. So it's very thorough, and in terms of the sensitivity of the information that we're accessing, this is my livelihood. This is how I feed my family. I certainly would never do anything, nor would anyone else that I know that's in my profession, to be able to jeopardize what I do to feed my family. So we're very protective. We We are working under the attorney-client work product most times, so that confidentiality is of the utmost importance to us. We take it very seriously as an organization of the LPDAM, but also just as general private investigators. Let's see if I missed anything. So yeah, I really want to hammer home that CPCS portion of it because it is important. And that's really what we're talking when we're talking about somebody's liberty at stake. It's just important. And when you think that one side, it's supposed to be an even playing field, right? When you get to court, when you have access to this information, and when you think that one side could, at the push of a button, have access to this information, and we're being required, it's vastly different when you go to branch. There is no one kind of guideline that says, oh, this gentleman, this lady is a private investigator. Here's the pathway to do that. That does not exist. It varies so greatly to the point where, just as an example, they might tell you that you need to go down to the legal department on the 3rd floor at Haymarket. So if you can imagine a Springfield investigator working a CPCS case or any other type of case, having to drive to Boston, pay for parking, wait in line, not to be able to make an appointment online for something that could have been done in 10 minutes at the click of a mouse in 2023. The infrastructure is already there. We are not asking to recreate something. It's already there for these other professionals. We simply want the ease of use to be able to access this information. I think that's all I have, and I appreciate your time listening to me today.
Thank you. I just had, I guess, kind of a mechanical or process question. As I understand the bill, and that's on an initial read, what the goal here would be to provide access from a remote computer terminal.
Yes.
Offsite into the registry's computer system, the records, which according to the bill, I think includes any facial recognition systems. And I could be wrong about that, but I think I saw that in the bill. But once in, I wasn't clear if the bill then restricted. So once you're, signed in, so you're identified as the user, you have legal access, blah, blah, blah. Which records were being searched for would in any way be limited. Once in, I would think what the bill does is provide access into everything in the registry's computers. And so that's one level of access. But the registry computers, of course, as we learned tragically 4 years ago, are connected to a national system as well. Is the goal to be able to access national databases that the registry also is linked to?
Well, I would say generally speaking, no, that's not what we're here accessing today. But I would say when you're investigating a criminal matter where somebody's liberty is at stake that they could go to jail for the rest of their life, being able to properly research and vet something is of the utmost importance. So although that's not what we're asking here for today, if those records do exist, if we're doing our job as investigators, we're going to try to turn over those leaves, so to say, or peel that onion back to be able to figure out, are we on the right track? Is this correct? Try to prove our theories wrong or prove something wrong. So or to disprove it.
Sure.
So we're trying to really access anything we can to be able to make sure that we're giving the proper defense that we're sworn to.
Fair point. So let me ask you, in the current system, and maybe you've done this in your direct work on behalf of clients, when you go to a registry office, and as we learned from Mr. Kraft, I'll call them counter employees, that's not a fair description, can't provide this access. It has to be done by a supervisor, Mr. Kraft mentioned. In that case where you're physically standing there or an investigator is physically standing there in contact with the registry supervisor, is that from their standpoint, I suppose, is that the existing fail-safe that says, I'm giving you access, I'm going to provide you the information that you're investigating regarding John Doe. without providing access into the entire registry database or the national databases that are linked to it. So isn't the supervisor kind of a protective failsafe for the integrity of the records currently?
Thank you. That's a great question. I will say, to my point of it being very different, when you go in to make or to try to get the initial ticket, the triage, if you will, at the registry when you walk in, you tell them that you're a private investigator, and you get a variety. They don't know. They're like, what? What are you trying to do here?
Yeah.
And then if you get to the supervisor, in my experience, what it appears to be is a lack of understanding and also a question of our licensing, right? Our licensing is published on the state police website every quarter, and we possess an ID card that has our license, our business name with the Commonwealth seal on it, signed by the colonel of the state police. We provide all this stuff to the supervisor. Now, if you imagine, that's just one record. They limit you to one record, one transaction. Sometimes you're able to access multiple levels, but to your point, yes, that is the fail-safe, that you're dealing with somebody who knows or is supposed to know, because you get very different. Sometimes when you get to the supervisor, we can't provide that for you. No, you have to do it by mail. No, you have to do it at Haymarket. So you could wait all that time and get in there and still be turned away, again, at the cost of the Commonwealth. Imagine you've got maybe $500, $2,500, or $5,000 in allotment from the Commonwealth, and you're going to sit in line for something that could be done in 15 minutes. So you get very different answers, and sometimes you ultimately don't get the records. It is trackable. So in my experience with other professionals, such as constables who are also private investigators and members of our association, some of those members have access. And so just in talking with them and understanding their access, it is trackable. It's less trackable when you talk about paper in a registry of motor vehicles transaction, as you just described. When you're now going to look through paperwork at something that somebody's so accustomed to looking at a computer. Let me see who accessed this when. If I were to log in, or anyone that does log in, I now have a login. What records specifically did this person access? If I were to go in there in that same day transactions how the registry refers to them, and I'm in that in-person transaction, I can only do one. If I then uncover a record in my review of a record that I've just received, now I've got to go get another ticket, and I've got to wait in line again. There's no method occasionally you can get if you've developed a rapport with an employee. But even when you develop rapports, I've been in front of a person on a Friday and gone back there on a Monday to get and they give me the records Friday, and gone back there on Monday and been turned away. They say you can't do that anymore. And there's no explanation provided. There's no nothing. It says you just can't do it. And it just doesn't sound reasonable.
Well, look, thank you. Those are my questions, and your firsthand experience, I think, is certainly helpful to me in understanding the mechanics of this. Thank you for coming in. Any other questions from members of the committee? Yes, Senator Keenan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chidge. I just wanted to offer for clarification. My understanding is that it would be a prohibited activity to access the facial recognition or to use the information for purposes inconsistent with the law. Is that your understanding as well? I mean, that's the way it was drafted, I believe.
Yes, sir. So each time we access the records, and as an example, if I were to go today and I wanted to use a piece of paper that I pull off of the website, again, it's very difficult to find where these nooks and crannies are on the website. There are what's called permissible uses, and this is what gets us past the Driver Privacy Protection Act to say, hey, we have access to this record, provide your licensed private investigator license, show us the copy of your ID. You have to fill out 2 permissible uses. The facial recognition, although, again, to my point of the CPCS, if there are any records, I have not utilized any of that, so I can't speak to us trying to access facial recognition or anything to that effect. But I would say if it does become relevant in a case, that might be something that we would want to access if it were relevant to a particular case that we were working. But there are specific cutouts in the paperwork that they ask you to fill out for the Driver Privacy Protection Act. So I'm a private investigator, here's my license, and that's really it. And the same exists when you use it in a third-party sense. So historically, there are really only 2 ways you go about it. You go in an in-person transaction, or you utilize a third-party vendor who accesses this information. For instance, we have many different types of databases that we use as private investigators, and those databases purchase the information from, say, a LexisNexis or whatever that's gone through whatever vetting process they have, that has online access, by the way, too. And that's how they provide this information. That information is stale. So if you imagine, I'm not really confident in the record that I got, because something could have transpired in the time that the record was pulled by the database and the time that I need to make sure that this is what it is when I'm investigating a case. I'm sorry, that was a roundabout way.
No, that's fine, but I think the language of the proposed bill specifically prohibits access to facial recognition. So you're right, you could get it, but you have to go through a different process other than what's permitted here. And
Yes.
then I think it's important to note that there's also provision in the bill, both bills, I believe, that would make any use of the information inconsistent with statute grounds for loss of your private investigators, private detectives licenses.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. It's important. We don't want to misuse the information. We don't want information that we use in our particular cases to go anywhere other than where they should be. In addition to the cutout that's in what you're describing in the bill, our private investigator license is very strictly scrutinized. We have a moral turpitude clause, and it's held very strictly. We're not looking to, again, this is how I feed my family, so I don't want it going anywhere other than it should, because it just has ramifications that are terrible. So we're very careful about it. Just as private investigators, we realize there are many records like that for us that are very sensitive, medical records, records containing rape victims, things like that. So there are lots of records that we don't want squeezing away. Registry is certainly one of them, and we respect the misuse, and we take it very seriously.
Thank you. Oh, sure. Back to the rep. I'm sorry,
Where have you,
Oh, I'm all
Just
set.
for free. Are you all
Thank
set? Oh,
Thank you,
okay,
Mr. Chair.
fine. Go ahead.
where does the registry stand with this? Are they opposed, or would they prefer that you have access to free up their employers? Or has there been discussion with the leadership at the registry? Because if they're on board with it and are not opposed, I think that's very helpful.
Frankly, I don't know. To answer the question, I will say it seems like a no-brainer from our perspective. It's something we already have access to. These are really just a couple of administrative clicks of the mouse. We've been trying to face this issue for decades as licensed private investigators, and it just makes sense. I don't know where they stand. We've all tried to gather as an organization and reach out to our individual representatives and senators to try to bring this issue up, and get their support for it. I've reached out to Senator O'Connor, who's been very helpful to me and kind of rectifying something in the field that as it happens, like, hey, you can't access, and he made a few calls and was able to kind of get us where we are. But when I asked them, I said, can the register, now we're looking at a more restrictive approach where they are now saying you can't do it at all in person. And so when I asked the senator, because I don't have any direct line or communication to the registry, can you find out a reasonable explanation as to why they're not, or they're restricting it, or they're putting it through? And the short answer is I don't know the answer to that question. Again, it seems like a no-brainer to me to be able to give us just ease of use versus in the way it's delivered. It's really a delivery method.
Thank you. Is that any further, Rep? Okay. Any other members of the committee remotely? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
You
much.
mentioned an additional, yes, sure. Yeah.
Good morning, Chair Creighton and Chair Strauss and the Transportation Committee. My name is Sean Burke, and I am the current private, I am the current Private Detective Association board member, owner of Courtside Advocacy Project, and have also authored the Massachusetts Private Detective Legal Manual, as well as co-authored an amicus brief to the SJC on issues involving private investigations in Massachusetts. I am in support of this bill for a few reasons. This bill is a cost-effective method to obtain RMV data. It's consumer responsible, and with many licensed private investigators providing services to the Commonwealth, it makes sense to streamline the delivery of approved businesses of the RMV data through licensed private investigators, as well as other industry-wide businesses that do things in the field, but also need the infrastructure that's in place. For example, constables and tow truck drivers, as well as police officers, all have access to this information. Currently, the Commonwealth, and for many reasons. So the reasons why I believe this is makes sense for all legislation is because licensed private investigators already have access to the registry of motor vehicle data, and this legislation just improves the delivery of such data. The RMV has a database for outside vendors. It's already in place. But legislatively, private investigators were not clearly defined to receive access. This legislation only provides licensed private investigators such access to the online database and eliminates or at least limits traditional in-person request at a local RMV office. The reason why I believe that this really makes sense for this board and makes sense for licensed private investigators and consumers is because right now, and I'll use the example that was already brought up, but I would like to break that example down a little bit. Right? If it takes 3 to 4 hours, legislatively, a private investigator can bill $75 up to $75 an hour for indigent clients, where I think that mostly affects everyone that's here on this board and the legislator. At $75 an hour for 3 to 4 hours to go into a registry of motor vehicle, wait, potentially even have to go back and get the data, will cost approximately $225 to $300 for that specific service. But if we have a database that's already in place, the infrastructure is already there, we're just tapping into it, that same thing to be able to bill would be 0.1 hours, which is $7.50. Maybe 0.2, which is $15. That is a huge cost savings. It makes sense. It also goes way beyond the state. A consumer who comes into my office and requires services or would like some services, we have an obligation to vet that, to make sure that the person is who they claim that they are and what they may be doing. And as part of that, we want to be responsible with the money that they provide us. The same responsibility that all of you are charged with. We have that on a business level. So we're just trying to make sure that in all cases that we can potentially save clients money, do it responsibly, and be able to have a good mechanism in place for everyone to be able to receive the best possible service from a Massachusetts licensed private investigator. And these bills do that. They help do that. They make Massachusetts and Bay State stronger. There is no need for us to continue the old ways. We now live in a society of online data as a part of all of our lives. This is one of those scenarios where the old has to become the new. And how that's done, and businesses and associations like us have to play a major role in the fact that we're all moving forward. So I strongly support this legislation. I ask all of you to strongly support this legislation. Let it make it to the floor. I believe it will pass because it makes sense, not only for the state, not only for licensed private investigators, but also the consumer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee? And remotely, seeing none.
All right.
Really appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very much.
much. Anyone else in attendance wishing to testify on any bills before the committee today? Seeing none, the committee is not and has not provided notice that we would go into a what we call executive session to take up bills. So that would conclude the scheduled matters today. And Senator, I don't know if you have anything to add. Otherwise, I'm listening for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.